Today was a great conversation. I get to talk to my partner in crime, my partner on this great journey, Debbie, and we just talk together about this big topic of bullying and all the damage that it does, and expanding the definition out from just this idea of kids on a playground to workplace bullying and parents bullying kids and people bullying each other in relationships and teachers bullying kids and teachers being bullied by someone else, and they're like all the ways that people bully us, try to get us to do what they want or just break us down, and how harmful it is.
I feel like I'm being bullied every freaking day. Like you turn on
Yeah.
the news, you like social media, it's just bullying. Like
Yeah.
even what's it called? Next door, right? Everyone's getting
Oh
bullied out
yeah.
there. Like God forbid you
Yes,
say something.
exactly.
But I think, for me, this subject matter is incredibly important. And my goal is to have this woman, Dr. Fraser, on, who wrote The Bullied Brain. And for me, it's all about those things, that the bullying that has gone on generationally and the damage that it's done to our brains. And I truly believe that's how we got here. I really
Yeah.
believe this is how we got to this place on the planet, because of bullying. There's other terms you can abuse, like whatever, but it's a bullied brain system. I think that's where we
Yeah.
live right now.
Just harmful. It's
Yes.
harmful to ourselves, harmful to each other, and then it gets passed down. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
The world is a lot right now. Are you feeling it? We all need new tools to help us walk through the chaos with grace, ease, and compassion for each other and for ourselves. In this podcast, you'll hear from parents, educators, and other experts who can bring perspective to the monumental job of parenting. It's time to level up and be warriors for our kids and our communities. This is the Warrior Parent Podcast. I'm Marci Mitchell.
And I'm Debbie DiManno. As parents, we understand that it really does take a village to raise our kids. We hope that this podcast serves to create and support that community for you. Join us as we discuss and practice our core tools, which are proven mind-body techniques that can be used by anyone to improve your life on a daily basis.
Hey, Warrior Parents. We will be talking today about suicide and bullying and trauma. So going to be another somewhat heavy episode where we're talking authentically about things that matter, but do take care of yourself. Thanks for listening. Well, welcome back to the Warrior Parent Podcast. We are grateful that you're joining us today. And today, our guests are ourselves. So Debbie and I decided it was time to have a conversation about an issue that keeps showing up for us. And I believe it's probably showing up for a lot of you as well. And that is bullying, whether it's online, in person, for your kids, for yourself, for the world. It's just something we're seeing, and it's disturbing, and we want to talk a little bit about it, break it down, and just kind of get into it. So thank you for joining us. And Debbie, why don't you kick us off today?
Okay. Wow. So this is a very broad subject, and we talked about, like, do we talk about this in general? Maybe we'll break it down into maybe just social media bullying at some other time, but it continues to show up, and I'm just so bothered by it. And
Mhm.
um it came up because I was telling Marcy the other day, like, I've been I've been watching a silly show, The Bachelor, on television, and I haven't watched it in years, but there's like a family acquaintance on there. So I got really involved. And the other night they were talking, and all these, beautiful girls who are being vulnerable out there, were talking about their social media and how they were being bullied
Mm.
online, and some of the horrific things that people were saying to these young, beautiful women who were willing to be vulnerable and kind of get themselves out there. And I just felt so disgusted by the whole thing. Like, really? Do we not have anything better to do than to jump on and throw out, some evil post, which is like going to ruin somebody's day, week, year, lifetime.
Mhm.
You don't know, right?
Yeah, you don't know. You don't know. You don't know what people's wounds are, and when you're going to just hit that thing that's going to completely upend their peace, their ability to function. And yeah, people, we know people have completed suicide based on bullying. Kids, adults, like that is happening. And if you don't stop and think before you speak, I mean, is that what is that what you want? And are you
Right,
going to be able to
right,
live with yourself if that's what
right.
happens?
Yeah. And, we say, I'm so tired of hearing this, the schools, wherever, we have a zero tolerance policy. Really?
Do you?
Really?
I mean, if you're doing the work, then well done, good for you. But if you're just thinking you're just checking a box,
Yes.
that's just not enough. That's just
Yeah.
And we know, this is, I'm not telling you anything you haven't heard probably, but we know that this idea of when you're online in particular, you're emboldened because you're hiding behind your keyboard warrior, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
that you say things that you would probably never say to a person in person, someone standing in front of you. So like, let that be your first, um, gate that you're going to go through before you post something. Take a
Right.
breath, take a pause.
Mhm.
Would I say this to the person if they were standing in front of me? And if not, maybe don't. And then the second piece is like, does this thing I'm about to say, does it meet with my values? Because I think most of us do have values of how we want to show up in the world. But sometimes when we're just reacting out there and just shooting stuff out, we're not thinking about that.
Right.
And once you put it out there, the damage is done.
Right.
So,
Right.
like pausing a little bit there and saying, wait a minute,
Yeah.
do I really want to put this out in the world?
Well, yeah, and putting it out to the world, like, isn't that just the understatement, right? So this
Yes.
becomes systemic, which I believe the whole social media thing has
Yeah.
become, right? It just builds upon itself and builds upon itself, and like I'm not even go down the political venue on this whole thing because,
Right.
right? But this cycle that we've got ourselves in, where somehow we think this is okay, and then parents are doing it, and then the kids are like, oh well, look at what my parents are doing. It should be okay for me to do this, right? What are you modeling for your kids, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yeah, so we were talking about this subject and how important it was to have this discussion, but when Marcy and I first started this podcast, coming up on a year pretty soon,
Hmm.
we talked about this book that I got. It's called The Bullied Brain. It's by Jennifer Fraser. She's a PhD. And there's also a foreword by Michael Merzenich. He's from UCSF, and he is the father of neuroplasticity. Believe it or not, there's
Hmm.
courses on neuroplasticity that you can take now. But this book, and I do want to have this woman on the podcast because I feel like this is invaluable information. I feel like we're talking about the bullied brain and what really happens to the bullied brain. And this doesn't have to be, just a kid or just social media. This is from abusive relationships. This is teachers bullying.
Yeah.
Yes, that
Sure.
really happens, right?
Sure.
This comes in all shapes and sizes, but what
Parents bullying kids and
yes,
bullying
we've
each
talked
other.
about we've talked about this before, and the brain as it's forming. We had Yuli, Lagakis on here talking about the teen brain and how it's forming, and this bullying is disruptive
Yeah.
of the neural pathways, right? And as a result of that, there's this pruning and all these other things that don't necessarily occur. So that's one thing that's going on in the brain. But the other piece is that you know during this time, especially for kids who are trying to be in a learning environment, um they just can't.
No.
It's impossible. It's impossible. So you imagine a kid who's gotten bullied in the morning, maybe on the bus, whatever. They show up for school. You think they're able to
They're not
concentrate,
available to learn.
right?
Yeah, and just backing that up with these terms for a moment. So this is all the stuff we talk about all the time, but if you are not familiar with the term neuroplasticity, it's exactly what Debbie was talking about. It's that scientific fact that the brain changes. It creates new pathways, neural pathways. It reacts to what's happening. And so if the good stuff's happening, that's building good stuff. And if it's bullying or negative self-talk, self-bullying, a lot of us self-bully ourselves. We talk about
Yes.
how the stuff we say in our heads to ourselves, we would never say to someone else. Oh, you're so dumb. Oh man, you screwed up again. What's wrong with you? Like, would you say that to your kid or your best friend? No, but you say it to yourself. So when it's the negative input, it is actually having a physiological change in your brain, and that change is way more intense and fundamental in those early years. First 25 years is when our brains are still cooking. 1 to 7, so fundamental for kids for development. So sometimes of our brain development, bullying or negative input is so much more impactful in a negative way. Or, I mean, it obviously can be a positive way too, but bullying is never going to be positive. And that this has these results. And then the other piece that Debbie was talking about with a kid who gets bullied on the bus or gets bullied all day long, not being able to access their education or just show up, is, again, that's the fight or flight. That's these physiological things in our nervous system where when we're being attacked, we're in defense mode. So that's the fight, flight, fawn. Like that's fawn is, when you're just trying to please everyone and, oh, it's okay. And then the freeze, where you just can't even, which was what my
Yep.
son used to do. He would freeze,
Yep.
couldn't talk, couldn't anything. He just shut down. So all of those things keep you from being present in your life. It certainly keeps you from accessing your education, but also keeps you from having good relationships, from enjoying the world, because you're in this constant state of overactive nervous system, out of alignment,
Yeah.
out of calm. And like
Well,
this is important.
yeah, drowning in cortisol, right?
Yes.
As I typically say,
Yeah.
the statistics are that 80% of those people who end up going to the hospital is because of stress. It's stress related, right? So
Yeah.
this all builds into this. I mean, all of this can be, resulting in, heart attacks, cardiovascular disease. The
High
list
blood
goes
pressure,
on.
stroke.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Everything, it's all related, and it's that mind body connection, but it's also what's going in, what's feeding, and then how are we responding? Are we in reaction, which is, like Debbie said, the cortisol, the stress, the, oh my God, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or are we taking a moment to breathe, pause, and say, okay, what is happening right now? That person just said something so hateful, so mean. And can you take a moment and say, you know what? That is not about me, because it isn't. When somebody is attacking, that is always about them. It's always about them. It doesn't mean you're
Right.
not doing something that you might prefer not to do, but their attack is about them. And so can you take a moment,
Right.
and it's not easy. Like, we've all been there where someone says something awful to you. I know for me, heart starts racing, stomach's turning, like I'm in a physical as well as emotional reaction. And if I can take a moment and breathe, and if nothing else, say, hey, you know what? This isn't okay how you're talking to me. And if you'd like to talk to me about this later, we can, when you've calmed down, or in a, in a more balanced way. But right now, and then you get to say, no, thank you, and walk away. You don't have to stay for that
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
able to realize what's happening.
Yeah. Well, there's, the other thing that, people talk about or don't talk about is this, workplace bullying or workplace terrorism, as people are calling it now,
Yeah.
right? And feeling
Yeah.
like they're so stuck because,
Right.
oh my God, I need this paycheck, right?
Right.
To take care of my
Yeah.
family. And how can I possibly leave? And then
It's true. Yeah.
those who are rising up to say something about it then are ostracized, they're fired, like all the horrible things that we hear about,
Not
right, in the
okay. Not
workplace.
okay. And then,
Yeah.
of course, also kids can't always, like, they can't say to their parent, hey, you
Right.
can't talk to me that way. I'm
Yeah.
walking away. I mean, they should be able to. They
Right.
should, because if you'll listen to that, you'll learn, and you'll be able to say, you know what, you're right. I'm sorry. But boy, and how great to empower your kid to do that. But that's not necessarily the situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the online bullying, the other piece of that, and, like Debbie said, we don't get political, but there is a presidential candidate in America now that has made it okay. And, name starts with a D and ends with Donald Trump, for anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about. But he just goes out there and says horrible things about all kinds of people, whether it's disabled people, women, people of color, calling, things like that. He's kind of, for a lot of people, made that okay.
Right.
And it's not okay. So, like, let's have a reality check. It's not okay.
Yeah.
Please remember that. Please. Yeah. And the fact that you're behind your screen or your keyboard does not mean that, hey, I can say whatever the hell I want. That's
Right.
not
Right.
how humanity works. That's not
Yeah.
how people who are connected.
Well, what's interesting in this book also is to speak about the bully themselves. So,
Mhm.
right there, no one wakes up and wants to be wants to be a bully, probably including Donald Trump, right?
Yeah.
So, but what happened to him along the way,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
And that's where this whole cycle begins. So so
Yes.
she speaks to, the bully and the trauma of the bully too, right? And it's not just like, oh, let's forgive or whatever. No, no, no. let's
Right.
that's not going to fix it, right?
No.
The bullies will just keep bullying, even when they're called out, even when they're
Yeah.
having to pay a whole bunch of money for being a bully, right? That they're going to keep doing that until we find a solution. So I'm sure you're all listening, going, okay, blah, 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 blah. They're all bitching about bullying. Well, believe it or not, there's a solution, right? Like we don't have to live in a world where this is the norm. We really don't,
Thank goodness.
right? Everyone's going,
Does
okay.
anyone, does anyone not agree that this is not working right now? Like, it's just not what we want.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
is the solution?
Yes. So, we have these epidemics of depression and
Mhm.
isolation
Yeah.
and anxiety and suicidality. Like we've given you all the numbers over the past, umpteen months. So, but I'm going back to this piece on neuroplasticity, right? So
Mhm.
there's all these studies being done at UCSF with this physician that I spoke about, but the brain is so incredibly amazing. You can remold or work your brain. So
Mhm.
we talked about this before in lots of other conversations, but you can do these rewires, right? So, imagine a child who grows up, they're in this abusive situation, the pathway is just telling them the same abusive story over and over and over and over again. So this
Yeah.
child grows up, they're trying to be an adult, having issues, right? So maybe at this point they're realizing, like, wait, like I got to do something. I can't live my life this way. Something, divorce, all the things that happen,
Mhm.
abuse, because this, as we say, is systemic and cyclic. So there's a massive amount of research being done to show that you can do complete rewires on your brain. You do
Yeah.
not have to live your life like that,
Yeah.
right? But that person, that human being, bully or not, now has an opportunity. And as you and I say all the time, uh, you know, the first step is acknowledging
Yes.
that,
Being
that,
awareness of what's
yeah,
going on.
that you're being a
Yeah.
bully,
Yeah.
right? And not thinking that that's okay. So anyway, there are a lot of some of the simple things that we talk about are tools just sort of for managing that stress. We do
Mhm.
have, the tool EFT, which can help, probably on a small level to rewire, but really is probably getting to a professional who can do the hard work, right?
Yeah.
There's NLP, neuro linguistic programming, which is a big
Right.
one. That one was big for me, and I talk about it a lot. Another one is hypnosis, right? Like those are
Mhm.
just a couple of examples of the things that we know to be true. We've
Right.
had speakers, a lot of them on our podcast who talk about all the new ways now that they're doing rewires on the brain.
Right. Right. And so that idea is to go back and process that trauma And maybe it's, someone like, for someone like us, could be 4 years ago. Process it and release it, because when we don't walk through it, when we don't process it, it keeps showing up. And so it
Yes.
shows up in weird ways. It makes you do crazy stuff. It makes you, like, I remember I used to, when I was my kids were young and I was full-time momming and homemaking. And for whatever reason, one of my ways of dealing with stress was control. So,
Mm.
and that's relatable, I think, for some people. So if things
Yes.
were going awry, I thought, okay, I can control. What can I control here? And for me, it often showed up in cleaning my house, like a mad, crazy cleaning woman. And I could remember the kids being kind of crazy and having conflict with my husband. And before I knew it, I was like just angrily spraying and wiping down counters and going after dust in the corners. And it took me a long time to get awareness about it and say, what the hell is going on right now? Why are you so angrily cleaning the house? Or,
Right.
and it was like that desire to bring in that control. So that's the first thing, is just that awareness that, oh, I think that if I clean the house, it will take care of the other things in my life. And where did that come from? I don't know, but let me take a look at it. Again, first step, awareness. And then what can I do to show up more healthfully in conflict, and take a look at what's going on? And also, if the other person you're in conflict with is in their reaction place, like, how do we normalize saying, wait a minute, let's take a breath here. And it could be, you know what? I am not emotionally ready to talk about this right now. I need a break. And again, this is some of these situations are harder to do this, but hopefully for adults, for in marriages and in partnerships, we can take that moment and say, I need that. I need a moment, and then come back more thoughtfully to
Yeah.
say, here's some of the things I need, and here's some of the things that I'm feeling when this is happening, and then listen,
Yeah.
what's going on for you, and not react with
Are you
those
are
old
you speaking about communication, Marcy?
communication, and what do they call active listening? And it's
Yes.
not, we're not necessarily taught this, but it's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we talk about these different kinds of bullying, but I had an experience, I think it was a week ago or maybe 2 weeks ago, with a post that I made on my Instagram account. And so I love Jennifer Lewis. I follow her and she posts such great stuff. And she's
Mm.
showing up as this empowered Black woman on the planet, and also a woman of an older age, which, as we know, women, certainly beyond, really, I don't know, it might be 30, but certainly beyond 40, we get sidelined. People say we're not seen. Nobody wants to hear from us. So she is not having that. And so she's speaking. And so I shared a post on my Instagram account last week with her, just talking about women's empowerment, and that women are not having it, basically. And in her amazing way, because she
Yeah.
shows up with humor, with empowerment, with sass, and with this bold, beautiful Blackness that I just love, and she's amazing. But so I posted that, and I got, some lovely responses and people saying yes. And I got some hateful, awful, misogynistic, racist comments that kind of took me back. And, it kind of shows that I come from a privileged place as a white woman, that I didn't expect it, but several just showing up with, attacking her looks, attacking the fact that she's, I mean, it's blatantly racist, but it's not always, what maybe you might call racism, but it's
Yeah.
the dog whistle kind of stuff. And her,
Yeah.
no, nobody wants to hear from you, and nobody's interest. Like, it was just a lot of just hateful, awful comments. And, I just had to stay on that post all day, deleting and blocking, because I'm not having that on my page. And it just was kind of an eye opener for me, and really kind of upsetting. And actually, you know what? I'll read you what I posted on there, because I felt like, okay, this is an opportunity to hopefully call this out and educate. But so I had to go back and put an update. And I said, for the mostly white, all men responding to this post with hate, derision, misogyny? Why do you feel so emboldened to openly post such hateful commentary when a strong Black woman speaks about female power? In what world is this okay? And why is it necessary for you to push back on the idea that women are empowered? Maybe check yourselves honestly and consider why it's so important for you to make unkind and unnecessary comments here, where we are celebrating women and Black women in particular. What are you afraid of? And then, as always, hate will always be deleted. And I didn't share that as a way to attack back,
Yeah.
but as a way, I really do want people to check themselves and say, wait, why am I responding this way? What is this coming from? And like I said earlier, is this in my values? Is this what I think I showed up on the planet to do, to attack women or to attack Black women, or to just show up in this patriarchal kind of nobody wants you anyway? Anyhow, it was, like I said, it was upsetting. It was enlightening in a way for me to see that how much of that there was. It's not a enlightening in kind, it's sad. It's a nasty way, but for me it was like, gosh, I can't imagine. I was reposting how much hate did she get on hers, and
Right.
she must have a team, because
Right.
my social media is not anything near hers. She must have a team of people going through
Yeah.
that to
Yeah.
pull that out, because
Yeah.
then that's just going to lead to someone else lashing back at them and saying
Yeah.
something hateful, and
And it goes on and on and on and on
on
and
and
on.
on. And
Yeah.
it just pulls us down in
Yeah.
vibration and in, like, this is not why we're here. It's
Yeah.
not why we're here.
I was just having that discussion with my husband about, these adult women on the Bachelor, as I was describing, and I was saying, these are grown human beings, right? And this is hard for me and you to do this. We're actually putting ourselves out right now, doing very vulnerable work right now. And it takes a lot to stand in your power, right? But imagine being a 13-year-old girl or a 16-year-old boy
Yeah.
who's getting bullied. They do not have the capacity or the skills or the tools or maybe the foundation or the infrastructure to
Right.
support that. And what do? Well, we know what they do, right? Because there's just statistics tell us. But I don't know what the moral of the story here is for you and I, other than it needs to stop. It
Yeah.
needs to stop. We're not serving anyone, when we're certainly not serving our children. And for you and I, this is the most important group on the planet right now, and we
Right.
need them. We need them to be healthy and happy, and this has to stop.
And centered, and know their self-worth, not be taken down by others who for some reason are doing that.
Yeah.
And that's why we did the episode, because I believe it needs to be called out. It needs to be called out. It can't just be okay. And so we need to call someone out each time, and not in a shaming way, because like
Right.
Brene Brown always says, shame is never useful. So
Right.
when we look at some of the things that happen sometimes when people get canceled in society or whatever, there's a difference from accountability and shaming. So accountability is saying, hey, that's not okay. Take a look at yourself, check yourself. What you're doing is not okay. But shaming is, oh, you're awful, you're a horrible
Yes.
person, and we don't intend to do that, even with people who are leading this, and people that we're not fans of. But
Yeah.
still, like Debbie said, everyone comes with their own story, their own trauma that led them there. So in an ideal world, people heal that trauma and they show up better.
Right.
But if we let this go, it's just more and more trauma. But if we start to call it out and we start to take accountability and say, oh, look how I'm showing up. Is that my value? Is that why I think I came into the planet,
Yeah.
to
Well,
attack women, or to
yeah.
attack people of color, or to attack
Well,
kids?
yeah.
Or is it something else? And then how do I want to be living from my values. I want to
Yeah.
be living from my values, not
Yeah.
just reacting.
Yeah. Well, and I think, one more note on this that I think we can all be doing is in the way of education, right? The
Yeah.
woman who wrote this book speaks to the fact that people don't understand the affects of the
Yes.
verbal abuse, right?
Yes.
Or the texting abuse or whatever we might call it now. But they don't understand what it's doing to the human brain. And so
Yeah. So important.
she claims like this should be taught in every school.
Should.
Every teacher needs to understand this,
Yeah.
right? This should be taught in medical societies.
Mhm.
This should be taught in places of religion for that matter. People do need to understand that words mean something. They have energy and triggers, and they're
They
just
do real damage.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
just destroying what's going on with humanity right now,
Yeah.
in my personal opinion. So if there are any people out there who can come forward and let us know like what they are trying to do around this. Maybe they're a spokesperson, maybe they're in the PTA, maybe whatever it is. We're all happy to have a conversation about the
Yeah.
damage that's being done around this. Right. And it's not just because little kids are crying and being hurtful, and that's the way of the world. I really don't believe that to be true.
Right. No, we don't
And
have to. Just because it's always been like this, it doesn't have to. And then when
absolutely
you heal the parents, then just like then the parents are coming and they're healing the kids, or they're not damaging the kids in the first place, because
right.
now they're more healed. So just because it was done to you, you can break that chain of abuse. And we've seen those images of, the grandfather had yelled at the father, had yelled at the son, but now the son to like at the latest stage, it stops here. Like you can stop that. And when I've said this so often, when you stop that and you heal that within yourself, you heal it backwards, you heal it back generations behind, but you also heal it moving forward, which is so, so important, because then we
Yeah.
can show up differently
Yeah.
on the planet. It
And
doesn't need to be like this.
that's why we're doing the Warrior Parent podcast. So
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
who's listening, spread the word about the Warrior Parents. We're willing to
Yeah.
talk about these very difficult subjects, and I'm
Yeah.
super grateful for everyone who's listening.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to call out bullying in a kind way. Like I said, not shaming, but like, hey, when you're saying that, is that in your values? Is that how you want to show up on the planet? Or take a breath, think about it, and then let's say something helpful, uplifting. Be
Yeah.
part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for
Amen to
listening.
that.
Yeah. All right, Warrior Parent community, we are so grateful for you. Thank you for listening today and always to the Warrior Parent Podcast. And now for your core mental health break. This is your opportunity to take a moment to support your mental wellness, your peace of mind, your own ease and grace. Take some time every day to support your mental health. You deserve it, and it matters. So now I encourage you to place your feet flat on the floor. If you happen to be outside, I encourage you to take your shoes off and put your feet into the ground, feeling that grounding energy. If you're inside or somewhere where you don't want to take your shoes off, that's okay too. You can still put your feet flat on the ground and feel into Mother Earth. Receive a deep breath in through your nose. Fill your lungs and your belly. And then release that breath. Today, let's open ourselves up to guidance, to our intuition, to what we are meant to know today. Sit in silence for just a moment and allow any insight, any ideas, any inspiration to just drop in. And when it does, sit with it. Keep yourself from immediately doubting or denying or saying, oh no, that's not for me. If it dropped in, it's meant to be looked at. Take a moment and look at it. Sometimes things will come in later when you open your mind. If something doesn't drop in right now, no worries. Just stay open. Thank you for pausing for yourself today. Your mental health is important, and you deserve peace, calm, and ease in your life every day. So please choose to receive it. It is always available right at your center, your heart, your core. Stay well, friends. Thank you for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast. You can find us at courexperience.org. Make sure you join us next week for another informative conversation to help you and your family show up mindfully, purposefully, and joyfully with each other and in your community.
Thanks to Samuel Hale, LLC, for sponsoring this podcast. Technical and marketing support comes from Inspire Your Brand. Our podcast editor is Justin Beeden. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, producers, or financial supporters. I'm Debbie DiManno.
And I'm Marci Mitchell. The Warrior Parent Podcast is a production of Cour Experience. If you resonate with the idea of creating a community to help support kids and families, won't you join us by following the podcast and sharing this episode? You can even write a review. It truly does take a village, and we appreciate you.